Hi guys, it's Jess from Honest Fiction, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to be sharing 15 of my favorite underrated fantasy romance books. Alright guys, so I'm sure you guys have noticed that fantasy romance is really growing in popularity right now, and I am loving it. I've discovered so many amazing fantasy romance authors and titles over the last 2 years, and I love the genre so much. However, I feel like a lot of people talk about Sarah J. Maas, as they should. I love her. And also Jennifer L. Armentrout, and even Carissa Broadbent and Rebecca Yarros. But there are so many amazing fantasy romance authors out there, and just some lesser known fantasy romance books that I kind of want to shout out. And hopefully you guys will get an amazing fantasy romance recommendation of maybe a book you haven't heard of before. So I have 15 underrated fantasy romance books I am going to talk about, and I am so excited. So if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit that notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram, Goodreads, and Patreon, all linked down below. With that out of the way, let's get into these fantasy romance books. So starting off with one of my absolute favorite fantasy romance duets, we have A King So Cold by Ella Fields. So the second book in this series is A Stray Prince. I actually prefer the second book a little bit more than the first, but I rated both books 5 stars. Oh my gosh, this fantasy romance duet is unlike any other fantasy romance I've read, mostly because the main character, this is very much almost a villain origin story, where we find out how this woman ended up becoming a merciless queen. So at the start of our story, we are introduced to Audra, and she has recently come into the throne after the sudden passing of her father. Now, on top of that, it seems like her kingdom is on the brink of war, and there is this army that is ready to invade and slaughter her people. So, on top of all of this, we also find out that Audra's husband has been cast out and has absolutely no memory of Audra, and he is about to marry another person. So Audra is very upset by this and brings him back to the kingdom, and once again, he has no memory of her, and the story kind of goes from there. But like I said, it is very much finding out why Audra just became this very cold and merciless queen, and it was so good. There's also a little bit of a love triangle that I wasn't expecting, and the second book takes place in a different location and is much darker in tone, check trigger warnings, but also is a lot more like, I don't want to say whimsical because it's very dark, but it has more of that feel of like magic. But overall, I love this duet, and I don't hear enough people talking about it, so please give it a try. And the next 2 books are also by Ella Fields. I will say I definitely preferred one book over the other, but I wanted to talk about both of them since they are set in the same world. So first up, we have The Savage and the Swan. So this is following a fae, I believe she's a princess, and she is able to spin thread into gold. It has a lot of different references to Rapunzel, the Swan Princess, like a lot going on. So this book personally didn't work for me. I'm also not a huge fan of the male narrator. But anyway, so we're following this fae princess who's able to spin thread into gold, and her parents have decided that she will marry a human prince in order for their kingdoms to unite and go up against this like wolf kingdom, which is actually fae that can like turn into wolves and have like powers and things like that. So anyway, before this wedding is set to take place, our main character goes to this wood where she meets this guy who kind of shows her how to fight and stuff, all to then discover that he is actually the head of the wolf clan, and the story goes from there. So like I said, I did enjoy parts of this book. I love Ella Fields' writing. It's somehow very lyrical, but also digestible, and just really paints a picture and paints a beautiful world. So this book, I think I ended up rating like 3.5 stars, but once again, had I read it physically and not listened to the male narrator, it might have been a 4-star. But this next book, The Wolf and the Wildflower, it can be read as a standalone. You don't have to read the book I just talked about. This book, one, infuriated me. I don't think I've ever been so mad while reading a book, but also was just so unbelievably good. I read this book in one sitting the day the audiobook released, because I had a friend that was telling me, like, you need to read this book, you're gonna love it, and oh my gosh, was she right? So this story is following a girl, or a fae woman, that knew that she would one day marry the king of the Fae and that he would be like the love of her life. Well, that ends up happening. However, it turns out he is not the love of her life and he actually treats her rather poorly. And she decides she's just gonna up and leave. She ups and leaves and ends up sleeping with a wolf, and then has to return back to her husband, and the story goes from there. So, from what I just told you, you probably gathered that there is cheating in this. There is so much cheating in this. So know that going in, but overall, I loved this book. I loved our main character and the love interest, and like I said, I was so angry while reading most of this. So just check trigger warnings, but overall, loved this book and highly recommend. And this next book, I ended up rating 4 stars, but I have to go back and do a reread really soon because the sequel, the audiobook, just released, and I really want to read it. So it is The Umbra King, and this is a fantasy romance. We are following a girl that when she was younger, she saw her twin be brutally murdered, and she actually watched and saw the person who did it. So as she's grown up, she's decided to become a vigilante killer. On top of this, she has the magical ability that she can see a person's soul color. So if someone is inherently evil, their soul is like black. However, she doesn't kill them until they actually act upon whatever crime they're gonna commit. So if she sees a black soul, she doesn't go up and like murder them. She kind of trails them for a little bit until they're about to commit a murder, and then she murders them. So anyway, she ends up being found out for killing all of these people and is sentenced to go to the prison realm almost. And what that is when she is sent there, everyone who is on our present realm will eventually forget about her, and she has to stay there for a pretty long time. And when she returns, she's gonna have no memory of the prison realm, and everyone she loved will have passed away by the time she's free. So when she gets to the prison realm, she discovers that the person who is the head of the prison realm bears a striking resemblance to the person that murdered her twin sister. And the story goes from there. It was so good. And it was spicy, but also there was so much angst because these two people, it has like a full enemies to lovers feel, and it actually stays that way for a decent amount of the book. And I just really enjoyed this and don't see a lot of people talking about it. So please, if you are looking for a very unique fantasy romance, check out The Umbra King. All right, so this next book I feel like was pretty popular when I read it, which was over the summer. However, I haven't been hearing people talk about it recently, and it is The Book of Azreal. Now, I will say the ending of this book is quite a, I wouldn't say cliffhanger, it is just really shocking. So I also need to reread this so I can pick up the sequel. However, I really enjoyed this. I think this one I also rated 4 stars, but this is following a woman named Diana, and she lives in a world where the gods have like abandoned the world, and something happens where her sister is about to die, and she just begs that someone come and help her, and I'm pretty sure it's a demon that ends up showing up and says, hey, I can save your sister, I can turn both of you immortal, but I'm probably gonna turn you into a monster and make you like an evil assassin, and you're gonna have to do my bidding forever because now you can't die. And Diana, who is just so desperate, is like, bet, let's do this. And then we follow Diana a little bit later in life. She is officially like an assassin for this demon, and he asks her to find the Book of Azreal. And when she tries to do that, she accidentally wakes up the top god who travels back to our realm and kidnaps Diana, and they kind of work together to find the Book of Azreal. However, they both have different motivations in finding it. And the story goes from there. So once again, I really enjoyed this. However, I forget a lot of like the little nuances. So I definitely have to do a reread before I pick up the sequel, but I really enjoyed this. So definitely pick it up. All right, so this next book, I am still not sure how I feel about it. I enjoyed it while I was reading it. I actually have a full vlog of me reading this for the first time that I'll leave in the cards and the description. But it is River of Shadows with Karina Halle. Now here's the thing with Karina Halle. I love her books. They are so bingeable. They are so addicting. However, it takes years. I am talking years from when the book releases physically to when there is an audiobook available, that by the time sequels come out, I have forgotten everything. That seems to also be a running theme in this video, which I was not anticipating. But anyway, I will hopefully continue with this book now that I've watched that vlog back and realized how much I enjoyed this the first time. But this is a fantasy following a girl whose father mysteriously passes away. So she travels to see, or for her father's funeral, and when she gets there, she finds out that her father's body is missing. So a stranger approaches her and says, hey, your father was actually a very gifted shaman, and you need to go down the River of Shadows into I believe, hell itself and talk to the god of death to get your father's body back. And she's like, okay, I'm not exactly sure why she agrees, but she does. And it's her and a companion journeying down the River of Shadows and going up against all of these like demonic and creepy things in order to get to her father. Now, I will say the one big thing I remember with this book is it feels like two completely different books from the first and second half. The first half is very much like traveling and trying to survive, and you're meeting all of these cool different things. And the second half feels very captor, captive, Beauty and the Beast, girl falling in love with her captor type vibe. So that part I feel like could have been worked out a little bit better, but overall this was really fun. So yeah, I will hopefully be continuing, and definitely check it out if you haven't yet. And next up, we have An Enchantment of Ravens. Now, I read this book about 4 years ago, and it was because a content creator was talking about how this book was similar to A Court of Thorns and Roses, which I had just finished and was looking for books that were similar. Unfortunately, this book really isn't that similar to A Court of Thorns and Roses, and I think I've even said in other videos that it is, but looking back, besides the fact that it contains fae and the main character is a painter, like, there's nothing similar to ACOTAR. But this still is a very enjoyable story. We're following this girl that is a very well-established painter, and a fae ends up coming to her and asks for his portrait to be painted. And she accidentally paints sorrow in his eyes, and the fae aren't supposed to express any sort of emotion. So he becomes very upset with her and takes her to the fae court. Now, the fae in this are very similar to the original, like, trickster type fae. And it's honestly very refreshing. I really was not expecting this book to be what it was, but I had a marvelous time with it. So if you are looking for more of the original, like, trickster, kind of not menacing, but not Rhysand type fae, then check this book out. And next up, we have Entreat Me by Grace Draven. Now, there are so many different Grace Draven books I could have added to this list. However, I feel like Entreat Me is a hidden gem that not enough people are talking about it. Radiance also deserves all of the hype it gets, but I loved Entreat Me just a little bit more. I feel like it has the perfect amount of spice and also an amazing plot and beautiful world building and writing. So the story is following a father and son who are both cursed and are in a castle that is frozen in time. Now, the father has been trying to end this curse for years, and he's slowly becoming more and more dejected. However, the son is still trying to break it. And one day he ends up going into town. He comes back with this beautiful girl that he says is going to be his wife. Now, that girl's sister is not okay with this. So she goes right to the castle to get her sister back, and the story goes from there. And I loved this. First of all, I also loved that it had really mature characters. We are not only following the son and the younger sister, we're also following the father and the older sister. And it was just such a unique Beauty and the Beast retelling. So please, if you have not read this yet, check it out. It is so, so good. All right, this next book I've actually talked about in a few videos, and it is slowly rising in popularity, but I still love it and want to talk about it. So it is White Horse, Black Knights. And this is following a girl who has the magical ability to talk to animals. There are certain people that are considered God-blessed, and they have a birthmark that like designates them as such, and people or nobles will try to marry and have children with God-blessed, hoping that their kids will then have some magical ability. So anyway, our main character, like I said, can talk to animals, and she's been in this horrible convent for years being really badly abused, and then one day a suitor comes, decides he wants to marry her, and she is sent back to her home. So her family also treats her pretty terribly, except for her stepmother, and they find out that her new husband-to-be wants her to travel completely nude for 21 days to his kingdom to honor the gods. And obviously, our main character does not want to do this. She also finds out that she is going to be in the company of another God-blessed soldier. So not only is she going to have to ride completely naked for 21 days, and all of these people are going to see her, she also has this grumpy soldier who has a magical ability, and I'm not going to even say what it is. And it's their story, and it's so, so good. And there are parts that are a little bit cringy, some involving goats. However, it was still so fun, and I cannot wait to read the sequel. So if you're looking for a very unique story that still has a lot of like the classic fantasy romance tropes, definitely pick this up and let me know what you think. So this next book, personally, I didn't love, but I know a lot of people really enjoyed the series, so I wanted to include it. It is House of Beating Wings. So in this story, we are following Fallon, and Fallon is a half-fae, half-human living amongst the high fae. So she is seen as lesser because she has rounded ears, which designates her as being a half-fae and not full-fae. And on top of that, she has the magical ability to talk to beasts. And this is seen as a no-no in this community because there are these water beasts that have been plaguing this area. So when Fallon is quite young, she ends up falling into this canal, and instead of killing her, the beasts save her, and then all of the other fae are like, we need to watch out for that girl. But anyway, as she's growing up, she ends up having a friendship with the prince of the high fae, ends up having her first kiss from him, and is just completely obsessed and devoted to this high fae prince. And then I believe it's a sorceress or someone of that nature who can see into the future, tells Fallon that she will have a life with the king if she can find these ravens. So she then goes on a quest to try to find all of these ravens so that she can hopefully marry the Prince Dante and rule with him. And it goes from there. So overall, I did love the world building in this. I felt like there were parts that were very unique. Personally, the main character, Fallon, really frustrated me. However, I have heard as you progress through the series, she does become a little bit more likable. So I might give the series a second chance. Let me know if you've read more books in the series and what you think. But overall, I was just kind of like about the book, but I'm willing to give it another shot. But definitely check it out if that plot sounds interesting to you. And next up is The Witch Collector by Carissa Weeks. So this is an enemies to lovers fantasy romance. We are following our main character who lives in a community where every few years or so a witch collector comes and takes a witch from their community and brings them to the Frost King. And these witches are never seen or heard from again. However, they do know that they are giving this witch in order to help protect the realm. So they're kind of okay with it. But our main character's sister was taken and she is very upset. So she decides that she is going to be the next witch taken by the witch collector and she is going to find her sister and kill the Frost King. Well, things end up going awry and the witch collector and our main character have to travel together to the Frost King. Once again, our main character hoping she can find her sister, but then things are uncovered and it kind of goes from there. I enjoyed this book. I think I ended up rating it 3.75. I feel like the atmosphere and the world building was very beautiful. It definitely has all of the winter vibes you can imagine. I just wanted a little bit more out of the romance, but overall it was still a very fun story and like I said, super atmospheric. So definitely give it a shot. So next up we have Lady of Darkness, and this is the first book in a multi-book fae fantasy romance series. And if you're a fan of For Blood and Ash, but you want a little bit more politics, a little bit more action, this is the perfect book for you. So we are following Scarlet, and she is one of the three adopted daughters of the Assassin Lord. So she has been brought up to be an amazing killer. She is feared by pretty much everyone living in this community. And one day she does something that very much angers the Assassin Lord. So he sends Scarlet to go live with these nobles until she can learn how to behave. So she's essentially in timeout, and then the Assassin Lord tells her that if Scarlet is able to kill this nobleman who's just come to the kingdom, then he will help her kill the Fire Prince, who is a fae that Scarlet wants to get revenge on for something that you will find out throughout this book. So that is really what is driving Scarlet. But like I said, this book really gave me From Blood and Ash vibes, and I just loved the overall story. There's also a subplot of these orphans that are going missing, and Scarlet is trying to figure out what is happening to them. And I just loved this so much. So I will definitely be continuing with this series. I'm pretty sure all the books have now released on audio, or at least most of them. At the time that I read this first book, it was the only one available via audio, which is why I didn't continue. But I will definitely be continuing and highly recommend. Next up is A Court of Blood and Bindings. Now, I have talked about this book in so many videos, so I'm sure you guys know what it is about. But we are following this girl that lives on one of the human islands. And in this world, there are human isles, and they are ruled by the Fae on the Fae Isles. Now, the Fae are able to rule the humans because they possess color magic. And what that means is you can pull on certain colors to create certain magic. So the Fae will pull on red to create destruction magic, or they'll pull on white to create healing magic, or they can blend colors together to create completely unique magic. Now, the Fae are ruled by the Mother, who is like the top Fae. She's unbelievably cruel, and she has a henchman known as the Silent Death. So our main character at the beginning of the story wakes up, her entire town is on fire, everyone is missing, and standing above her is the Silent Death himself, and the story goes from there, and it is so good. The romance in this is just perfection. I also love the magic system. Super unique. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Words of Radiance, but not completely. But overall, I just love this. And also, the love interest in this isn't able to use his voice, so our main character ends up teaching him a form of a sign language, and it's just, it was so good. So if you haven't read this yet, please check it out. It deserves so much more love. All right, so this next fantasy romance is another one that didn't work for me. However, if you are primarily a romance reader and you want to get into fantasy romance, I feel like this is a good place to start. And it is Vicious Bonds by Shanora Williams. Now, I love Shanora Williams' romances, Wanting Mr. Kane being one of my absolute favorite age gaps. However, this was her debut into fantasy romance, and for me, it left a little bit to be desired in terms of the world building, and yeah, there were a few things, but there were parts of this that I really enjoyed. So we were following our main character, and her brother has recently passed away, and she's kind of grappling with that, and she's also hearing a voice in her head. Now, she doesn't want to tell her friends about this because obviously that seems a little bit crazy. However, she keeps hearing this voice, and then when she's sleeping, she's starting to dream about this voice. So one day she ends up taking I believe a garden gummy, and falls asleep. And when she wakes up in another dimension, and the person that's voice she's been hearing is standing in front of her, and on top of that, he can hear her voice in his head. So it has a little bit of a Fated Mates feel, and I didn't know when I went into this that this is influenced by Peaky Blinders, but oh my gosh, if you love Thomas Shelby, definitely has the Peaky Blinders feel. So overall, I think this is definitely worth checking out. Once again, if you are a romance reader and want to get into fantasy romance, this is a very good introduction, but for me, I just wasn't crazy about it. And next up, we have A Dawn of Onyx by Kate Golden. Now, I will say I ended up enjoying this book a lot more than I thought I was going to. It is very predictable, but yet somehow still very fun. So we're following this girl that lives with her two sisters, and she has the ability to heal. Now, unlike other people in this community, she doesn't have to do a spell or any sort of witchcraft. She just has this magical ability almost within herself. So one day she is just working around, living her life, and her brother ends up showing up. Now, her brother is supposed to be off fighting in this war, and we find out that her brother is actually a deserter. And on top of being a deserter, he has led the people that are chasing him right to his front door. So the entire family decides they are going to flee and try to get to a different part of this continent. However, while they are going to flee, our main character realizes that she left her mother's medicine back at the house. So when she returns to get the medicine, she ends up being captured, and she decides to make a deal with the soldiers. She says that, hey, I will heal all of your fallen soldiers if you don't go out and try to find my family. And they agree. So she becomes the prisoner of the Onyx King, and the story goes from there. So once again, super predictable, but also I thoroughly enjoyed the story and cannot wait for the sequel to come out. And last up is by far my favorite book on this entire list. So if you're going to pick up one book from this video, please consider picking up A Heart of Blood and Ashes by Mila Vane. I just realized that this has under 4 stars on Goodreads, and it deserves so much more love, especially because of the main female hero. I love her so much. She is one of my favorite fantasy romance heroines. She's so powerful and so smart, and I love her. But anyway, the story is following Maddox, and he is the prince of this barbarian clan. And one day when he is out fighting this battle, he finds out that his parents have been murdered. So he is now the king of the barbarians, and he wants to get revenge for his parents' murder. So he believes he knows who is responsible, but when he goes to capture them, he ends up capturing Evie, who is the princess of the people he believes responsible. And before he can kill Evie, she asks that they work together, they get married, and then together they kill her parents. And at first, Maddox is not really agreeing with this, but eventually he agrees, takes Evie as his prisoner and eventual wife, and the story goes from there. But really, like I said, the highlight is Evie, because she has, I forget exactly what happened to her, but she can't use her legs very well. However, she is able to kind of use her mind in order to stop that from preventing her from keeping up with all of Maddox's people. So I loved Evie so much, but also the romance is so good and definitely has a real enemies to lovers feel. And overall, it is just one of my favorite fantasy romances. So please, if you pick up any book in this video, definitely check out A Heart of Blood and Ashes. All right, guys, those are some of my favorite underrated fantasy romances. I hope you guys were able to find a good rec from this video. And thank you guys so much for watching. And also thank you to my Paladin protectors, Amanda, Erin, and Leslie. Thank you so much for supporting my channel. And I said this already, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. And if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye.